Hi there, batting cleanup here. My name is Brian Fitzgerald, and I'm the founder and CEO of a company called Tinkergarten. And Tinkergarten was started by my wife and I. My background is a kind of a career in technology and education technology, and my wife is a career educator. And we basically started Tinkergarten as a project, and it's now grown into kind of a fast-growing company. And it started back in 2010. We had a number of different observations, but one of the observations that we had when we had our first daughter is that she was now going to be growing up in a world where she's spending a lot of time on screens, indoors, and increasingly we were noticing trends around kids living much more structured lives, kind of growing up quickly, learning how to read faster, tracking into sports earlier. And what was being lost was that moment, those first few years where kids could really expand and play around and mess around and really expand their thinking through trial and error, kind of like when you and I grew up. And it was our observation that if we were going to do anything as a family, that we wanted to be able to bring her that kind of experience. And so what we started to do was, think about this at a more, kind of long-term level. Turns out we weren't alone. There's about 30 years worth of research which talks about this. And if you talk to any educational expert, whether they're a developmental psychologist or a neuroscience, they will tell you that the way that somebody learns in those first few years is through play. And what was alarming to my wife, who was then a principal in an elementary school, was this increasing trend where there was a kind of a lack of being able to deal with ambiguous problems or switch contexts or deal with situations that were on the fly from her children. So what we did was we ended up developing a curriculum which was based on a framework of scenarios, rich play scenarios. And we structured a class environment around that, and we started to bring it to an urban park in Brooklyn, New York. And what's happened since then, over the course of the last few years, is that's grown into kind of a very fast-growing movement. And what Tinkergarten is doing is actually taking technology and applying it to make sure that kids can get that time to play and be outdoors. And so what we've done is we've created this infrastructure, a platform that allows anyone to be found. We vet them, we train them, and we coach them on becoming an instructor. And when we do that, we give them a tool set that they need in order to run their classes. And in a marketplace type of fashion, we basically match families in their communities with the people who are running the classes. And so this is the way that this has looked over the last few years. Prospect Park in Brooklyn was where the first class began. We hired a handful of teachers and we trained them in person. After that, we began to use our technology, which at that point, a CTO joined us, Gary Burns, who was the CTO most recently at meetup.com, and helped us to develop this learning platform effectively to be able to train and deploy these leaders. After doing some market testing around the country, we began to kind of let it loose and allow people to apply. And over the course of the last year, we saw over 10,000 applications for people who wanted to do this work last year. And today, we're generating about 200 applications a day for people who are interested in this. So, what is Tinkergarten right now? It's something that's spread out. We're in nearly all the U.S. states. We have close to 600 leaders around the country. That number will probably double by the end of the year. And we're bringing more and more families outside through this program. So the way that it looks is basically a kids class. We have 1-year-old to 7-year-old kids with their parents in a group in a park. And this meets once per week. And the scenario is set up by the individual, but it's running off of our centralized curriculum, and they're utilizing their tool set in order to bring the families into the program. But they'll spend an hour and a half or so out in a park, kids will, in a very kind of obviously stimulating environment, but a calming environment. So it's this really nice balance and a very interesting classroom, so to speak. And they get the ability to basically do a lot of exploration and self-directed learning, but they're doing that in a social environment, which is really important. And that sort of balance is something that we find really brings out a whole lot in kids. And we've got countless examples of people who are kids who are motivated or kids who are undermotivated or kids who never really fit in a certain kind of structured environment who thrive in this kind of scenario. For the parents, they're getting some learning too. So what we're doing here is we're effectively coaching them. Parents are receiving this rich stream of communications about what their kids are doing and what they're learning all along the way. And in person, that facilitator, the leader, actually gives them an opportunity to learn about their child in the moment, to give them advice. Maybe you need to take a step back and let the child, do something on their own, or maybe you need to, lean in a little bit and prompt them with a question. We coach them on these types of things in order to make that self-directed learning more and more important for the child. Now, what's really interesting about the way this business works is the leaders themselves are not traditional educators. Only about a third of them are. We basically take the best and brightest people who are really well connected in communities. So everybody from pediatricians to scientists to occupational therapists, and we make them leaders. We train them and we give them what they need in order to facilitate this rich environment. And they earn money while they do it. This is a very fast-growing business. We're growing 500% year on year, both in terms of the leaders themselves as well as the revenue. The economics are really, really interesting. Unlike businesses that require a lot of geographic density in order to make them work, Tinkergarten basically requires one leader and a handful of families who want to do it. Classes will break even after a few students in them, and so it's a very scalable model with very high gross margin at the unit level. And the parents are loving this. We're doing it all around the country. We're increasing our NPS score every single season. And we're also reaching very diverse populations. So it's not just for affluent communities. In fact, we're going to be working with Head Start coming in the summer and bringing this to disadvantaged communities as well. And on a global scale, we're very ambitious in terms of where this goes. We think we have a really interesting model in terms of this parent and child support mechanism, which we think we can syndicate and take in many different directions. So we're really excited about the direction. And I'm here at GSV. We're in the process of doing some fundraising, but also looking for some very strategic partners. So happy to talk with anybody about the business if you're interested. Thank you.